What's up, guys, and welcome to the Rebalance podcast, where we dive into topics that matter most when it comes to overcoming struggles, injuries, and finding balance in your life. Everybody's idea of balance is that bit different, so my goal is to give you different perspectives, practical tips, as well as expert insights into what it means to live a balanced life. My name is Robbie Cassidy. I'm a physiotherapist and a health coach, and I've been helping people reignite their love for challenge, overcome their fear, and find more balance in their life through the process of self-development. So, let's get into it. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. And in this episode of the podcast, we're going to talk about a technique that I use with a lot of my clients to help them to, design their life, think of a more ideal lifestyle. And I suppose it really helps people if you're feeling a bit lost on what to do with your life and what you want to do with maybe the rest of the year. Maybe it could be the next 3 years, next 5 years, whatever it is. This is a technique that I use, and I'll go into it in a small bit more detail. It helps you to really get to the core of what you want in life. And I find it's such an effective technique. I use it myself all the time. And yeah, I suppose without further ado, we'll jump straight into it. Okay, so first off, I always look when I'm on a call with a client, especially when they're feeling stuck, or around January, February as well, is kind of a good time to do it. Helps to reframe the year a small bit more. But if someone's feeling stuck, I'll often ask them, okay, right, I want you to give me outside of the box options about how you would structure your life. And I'm talking about, I always follow up with, I only want the crazy ones. I don't want the simple ones, the easy ones. Oh, I want to gym 3 times a week. I want to do this. I want to do that. The reason being is that when you ask someone what they want to do, a lot of the time they will just give you straight off these beliefs of what they feel that they can do, what are realistic. And what I often find is what people think is realistic is generally way underneath what they can actually achieve and what they can actually do. And David Goggins has a great thing in that he often says that people quit at 40%. So you still have that 60% that you can keep going, but they'll say, okay, this is good enough for me now. And then a lot of the time what will happen is we fall into this comfortable lifestyle, comfortable way of living, easy routine, and we'll just go day in, day out with that. And then we realize then after a couple of years, why am I feeling down? Why am I going through these depressive episodes? Why don't I feel motivated to do new things? And it's because it's become part of your routine to do that. So this is a real way of just breaking that, barrier, or really breaking the norm, breaking outside of that and really thinking outside the box. So it's honestly something I do myself all of the time. When I ask these questions to other people, I'll generally follow up with, I'll say, look, I want you to give me outside of the box options of how we can structure your lifestyle. And I say, and I could not care less what you say. I say, generally or genuinely, I want you to think of the craziest things, because when you start to think of the craziest things, it starts to spark this creativity. It's really interesting to watch people when they do start to think outside the box. And I'll generally follow up with okay, I want you to, if you told me you wanted to go to the moon by the end of the year, perfect. All right. If you told me you wanted to basically walk from, Spain to Jerusalem, great. Okay. These are the things that if you said that you wanted to go live with a tribe in the Amazon, perfect. And I know it sounds crazy if you're listening to this, but what it does is it starts to spark this creativity. You start to come up with these ideas, that things that you may have thought of as a child. It gives you that freedom to think like a child again. And when you do start to think like that, you start to form this new identity or new way of looking at your life and what's actually achievable and what's possible in your life. Because for me, a lot of life is about experiences and the experiences that you take from it. And if we fall into that kind of mundane routine that things are just going over and over and over again, and obviously there's times that you have to do that. There's no question you can't just be chopping and changing and doing crazy things all the time, or you're going to find yourself all over the place and it's going to be disastrous. But there is times that you need to break the mold. When you ask yourself this question, I want you to write it down, not just think about it. I want you to write it down, and I want you to say them out loud. The reason you get people to say them out loud is that when you say something like this out loud, it generally it doesn't sound that crazy then. Because if someone has done it before, someone can do it again. It's like that Roger Bannister effect of the 4 minute mile, when no one thought it was possible. Even scientists and doctors and everyone, researchers, all said that to break the 4 minute mile would break the body, in that if you were able to run that fast, the body would break down. So it's not actually physically possible. But then when Robert Bannister broke it, within a month, someone else broke it then, because he obviously had done it, and then it seemed more achievable, and then the next person came around and did it. It's actually funny that I should know the name of the other guy, but I just know the name of the first guy who broke it. I suppose it comes back to that, really, and that isn't that very common. But yeah, when we're looking at this, guys, outside of the box options really, really does help you to think bigger. If you can just get a journal, and I want you to write at the top of the journal, outside the box options for designing my lifestyle over the next year or 2 years or 3 years. Okay. And underneath that, I want you to spend 10 minutes jotting down ideas, just writing them down, anything at all. It doesn't make a difference. Honestly, the crazier, the better with this. Okay. What it will also do then, and what I often find with clients, and what I find with myself when I do this myself, is that it will highlight a lot of your limiting beliefs. So things that you didn't even realize are in the background. Okay, and you generally develop these limiting beliefs through experience, things that have happened to you, things that people have told you, the environment that you're in. A lot of the time, this is a very difficult thing to break, because you don't realize your biases. And I heard a great quote by, it was actually Alex Hermosi, but he took it from another guy, who said that everybody questions their beliefs, but they never question the things they really believe in. And for me, it really changed my mind on a lot of things, because there's certain things that you believe in and they're so inherent to your core values that you really hold, that you never question whether they're right or wrong. And a lot of the time, these limiting beliefs, especially if they started from a young age, because a lot of people have limiting beliefs from a young age, depending on what happened to them in school, what happened to them in sports, their family situation. They have these beliefs that are tucked in there nice and deep, and they're difficult to shake, no question at all. But by using this outside the box options, you will find that you'll be hesitant to write something down, because you'll be like, no, that's too unrealistic. Okay? So that's why it works so well. It really helps to kind of refine ourselves and help us to think what's possible, like what actually could be possible or what's unrealistic. It doesn't really make a difference. Like, let's look at this from a risk versus reward perspective. Of you writing down something that is so crazy, maybe somebody stumbled upon it someday and they saw it and they said, I can't believe that person wrote that down. Bang, gone. That's it. That's the last they would think about it. But the reward of actually putting that down, and the reward of challenging your own beliefs, means that you can change your life in a matter of days, weeks, months, just from putting down things that you thought were unrealistic. And as I said, once you put them down and once you say them out loud, it doesn't sound as crazy. Okay, so you really want to try to become aware of those limiting beliefs. It's something that I often do and really try to do it. It's something that I think an easier way for me to do it is, when I really believe something, I try to look at the complete opposite side. And I've talked about this on other podcasts as well, where you try to change your perspective and focus on something, the opposite side of it. Like, as I was saying, I kind of made the example in a health scenario about like foam rolling, where it was shit. Everyone looked at it. Everyone thought it was great. Then it stopped. Like, they were like, okay, no, there's no use to this at all, because they were using it for all the wrong things. But now it's kind of coming back around again that, okay, maybe this idea of like self-massage could be more therapeutic, more beneficial for that person. Maybe it helps them to down-regulate. Okay, so you always, I think, just coming back around and trying to make the argument for the other side is always very handy. And it does help you to shake these limiting beliefs. When I do this with people as well, so I'm going to give you two things. I'm going to say, we have the outside the box options, and then I have a journal heading that you put underneath that. Okay, but before I go into that, often people, when you say outside the box options to them first, they will give you their deepest desires or aspirations and what they want to do with their life. And sometimes it's been crushed by, let's say, their environment, confidence, the people around them, their friends, their family. The people that you hang out with have such an influence on you. It's actually crazy. And Me and Luke, a friend of mine, we had talked about this a couple of podcasts ago about actually changing that environment, changing your community, because it does help you to think differently and think bigger and have a different perspective on things. And you can always go back. There's no question, you can always go back. You don't want to just burn all your bridges, but it does help you to change how you think about it and how you think about life. Getting this idea of outside the box gets people to the core, or gets to the core of what somebody actually wants in a lot of cases. Because when I say it, they'll start giving me crazy options, but then those crazy options will start coming into like what their aspirations are. And then once you get an idea of that, like that's what I'm kind of looking for when I do this, is that I'm looking to just open up that creativity and open up that kind of childlike mindset. And then I come down and I use this next question to really try focus that in. Okay, because now they have all these crazy ideas. Then we look and we start to focus in. What's up, guys? Robbie here. I hope you are enjoying the podcast so far. I want to take a moment just to personally ask you for your help. If you're enjoying the podcast, would you be willing to share it with someone you think would love it too? Maybe a friend, family member on social media, or even if you just brought it up in conversation with someone you know. The recommendation means the world to us, and it's because of people like you that we get to be able to produce this podcast on a weekly basis. So thank you so much for your support so far, and I would love if you could help us reach even more people who could benefit from it too. Really appreciate you, and we're going to jump straight back to the podcast. And I say, if we were to have this conversation in 3 years, and you were looking back over those 3 years, what has to have happened in your life, both personally and professionally, for you to feel happy with your progress? So now we've moved from outside the box crazy options to actually 3 years of planning. And the idea of framing it, and I talked about framing in a recent podcast, in my podcast before this one, the idea of framing something first and then asking a question about it, it changes people's perspective on it. It gives a more focused way of looking at it. Now you've said all these crazy things. Now you've come up with all these ideas that seemed unachievable at first, but as soon as you frame the question, but if we're having this conversation in 3 years and you were looking back over those 3 years, what has to have happened in your life, both personally and professionally, for you to feel happy with your progress, you will start to anchor yourself to some of the things that you've said before. And as I said, a lot of the time you'll come out with your core aspirations in those things. So you'll often find that when you say that, the outside the box options, and when you ask them this question, their core interests have already been put out. So they will start to undershoot here in a lot of cases. And it's funny because if I ask this question first, if I say if we have to have this conversation in 3 years, if I ask this question first, people will always undershoot what's possible and what they could do. Always. They'll never just come out with some crazy thing. Well, I'm sure there are people that do it, but a lot of the people who I've been working with, or I've come in contact with, or I've worked with in the past, generally because they want to be modest, they will undershoot what's achievable here, because it's a 3 year time frame. In 3 years, you can do a lot with your life. That's why I frame it first, and then we crack on with this question. And I say the same thing. When you're journaling, I want you to do outside the box first, and then the next one, I want you to ask this question to yourself. Because they've done that before, because it's been framed in this kind of creativeness and this idea, now you get to the core of what people want, and it opens up new doors. And that's when me as a coach, I start to push on those buttons a small bit more, where I start to push people towards, okay, like let's actually decide on making proper change here in your life. Let's not just focus, okay, let's go back into the same routine of what we've been doing. Let's try to break a bit of a limiting belief, and let's try to up level, in a way, your life. Let's try to change how we look at it. So the ones that initially didn't seem realistic because they were said out loud, now you can start to invest a bit of time into thinking about how you could put those in place. How you could, let's just say, action plan towards them. And just by investing the time and thinking about them, you'll start to notice that they do become a lot more realistic. So how can you use this to structure your life? As I said, first off, writing them down is massive. Now you have this framing of new ideas, this new possibilities. Now you need to start thinking about how you can put that into a 3 year plan. And it doesn't have to be you have to take off every crazy thing. It just means that you could remember the question was to make progress, or for you to be happy with your progress. That was the question. So It doesn't have to be too realistic yet. You don't have to tick them all off, but just start by making a plan. And it's very, I think it's amazing how powerful this can be. It's fascinating what people, once you get those you break that cycle of thinking that they're just thinking of kind of just keeping routine and keeping the same over and over again. This idea of changing it completely really refocuses them, and they actually get a bit giddy. You often see it because they start to come up with ideas and you start bouncing off each other. It's great to do. You can do it with your friends. Like, you don't just have to do it by yourself. You could easily do it to your friend. Like, what's the craziest thing we could do this year? Boom, boom, boom. Okay, all right. Like, let's actually be realistic. How would we do that if it was possible? And then you start jumping over and back at ideas, and you'd be surprised what you'll do when you start to do this. And you'll have so many more experiences in your life as a result of doing this. Honestly, it's something that I do all the time. A lot of my friends, they know well that if they ever throw out an idea, we're always trying to get to, okay, it doesn't matter how crazy it is. How would you do that? How could you put that in place? And that's something that I love to do. Some examples of how this has helped people that I've worked with in the past. Really interesting one was I had a lady who was really struggling to walk and move, and she was really not enjoying her life. And her walking was one of her favorite things. Running was actually one of her favorite things, but she hadn't run in so long because she had she had a significant amount of pain. And when we started to do this at the time, that is like, oh, I'd love to go back and start walking. And I was like, yeah, but to be honest, we could get you walking pretty soon. I was like, I want something a bit more, as I called it before, as a big, hairy, audacious goal. I said, I want something a bit more hairy than that. And she was like, okay, well, I suppose if walking is the biggest issue now, I'd love to run a marathon. So we said, perfect. And no exaggeration, in 4 months, I think it was 4 months or 5 months, she had run a marathon, because she had decided on, okay, it's not just about getting back to walking, it's about getting to this big, big goal. And let's try, if you're going to make them, you make them big, in my perspective anyway, because why not? You should. Maybe that's a bias of mine, but I think you should. Another one was picking up new sports where fear once held them back from getting involved, whether that could be Muay Thai, it could be Jiu-Jitsu is obviously one that I lean towards a small bit more because it's a nice path, it's a nice journey to get there. It could be setting up your own business. And I got a message from a friend who's an old client last week after I put out the last episode, and he said we had talked basically about different beliefs of what he wanted to do. This is a year ago, things that he wanted to set up in his life. And basically he texted me and just said, look, I got my first, he was working a job that he wasn't enjoying, and he wanted to change into more of a fitness because he was always into fitness. And he had played sports at a high level. So we were talking about how you would do it, how you would set it up over and back. And basically he texted me then and he said, had my first 1-to-1 last week. So it took him 9 months or longer to get things in place. But just by changing his mindset and focusing on the things that would make his life better and lifestyle better, he changed from a job that he really didn't like, put in the time, and now he's able to work on the floor, and he's looking to build that business and build his own business. So I was delighted to get the message, to be honest. I was actually very, very happy, because it takes a lot of work to be able to do that. It's easy to have the idea, but then to put that in place, I think that's a huge one. Other things would be a lot of people who would have played at, this is common, who would have played at club level, and then we start to do this idea, what would you really like to do? And then they start to chase that county status of playing at a higher level, or international status in some cases. I found those very interesting as well, where if people, they just kind of had these limiting beliefs on themselves. I don't think I would ever do that. But then once we start putting in the training, once we start putting things in place, they do. They start working towards it, and it's just the process of Kaizen, Japanese. You're going to be hearing all about the Japanese ideas and concepts and that over the next while, because I'm going deep into them recently. But this idea of Kaizen is what Toyota use, where it's a 1% improvement every day. You get the ball rolling, and then you just look to improve by 1% every day. Just while it's rolling, you make changes as necessary. Other ones then that people would have done. Well, I suppose I should say, basically, it's how I decide what I do myself with my life. It's one of the reasons I said, okay, let's go to Argentina, because, and I will do a separate podcast on this, but my biggest struggle in life, not my biggest struggle, I've had a couple of different ones, but one of my biggest learning struggles was learning a language. I've really struggled to learn languages through school, for my own fault, obviously, because I was a little prick in school, and then at different times I may have not gotten on with the teachers that were teaching the language. So there's that, and I was ignorant as well. So coming here to Spain, I remember thinking like, okay, like where would I go, or Argentina, I should say, where will I go next? And I was like, well, I need to learn a language because it's something that I've always struggled with. So where else to go? I always wanted to go South America, Argentina, nice place, perfect. But that was an outside the box option first. I could have just went to Spain, but I was like, no, let's try something else. But other than that, when I look back at the people that I've worked with, when we've used this technique, people have decided to do, no joke, ultra endurance events where we looked at it and we said, okay, what will we do? And they said, look, I'd love to cycle from Finland to Spain. And I was like, Jesus, I didn't even think of that idea. And he was like, yeah, it's something I'd like to do. It's something I always thought would be a cool thing to do. Starting in that kind of colder environment and coming all the way down into Spain. And I was like, perfect. Right, next week, let's lay this out, how you could do it. And in fairness, he put it in place. We basically planned it out, how you would do it, the different training methods, got other people involved. Really, really interesting. And a lot of the time it was just, okay, let's look at something big and hairy. That was it. So often you'll see people change their career, change the way they live their life. They might go to remote working. They might plan retirement a bit more. It's a really, really effective method, and I honestly would push you as much as you can to try to do it. I won't go on and talk about it too much more, but to bring you back to it, the very first journal entry that you put in is outside of the box options for structuring my life. And then I want you to take 5 to 10 minutes of jotting them down. Once you write them down, I want you to say them out loud. Then, once you have that done, go away, grab a cup of coffee, go to the toilet, do whatever you need to, but just have a little break, come back in, and then you say, right, the next heading, you can do it whatever way you want. We were having this conversation in 3 years, and you were looking back over those 3 years. What has happened in your life, both personally and professionally, for you to feel happy with your progress? And then I want you to just start jotting that down, okay? But you need to frame it in the outside of the box options first before you do that, because it just helps to keep things wild. But for now, that is everything from me. And yeah, I hope you start to use this technique. I hope you start to implement this technique. And I would love to hear how it works for you and some ideas that you've come up with. But for now, that's all from me. And I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one. Okay guys, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're looking to learn more about what we do, as well as check out any of the mobility and rehab programs we have available, just head over to the description of this podcast and you will find a link to all the programs there. As always, thank you for listening, and I will chat to you all again in the next episode. Have a good one.